Okay, so we are live. Hello friends, I Joyashree Dey, project lead for the story project 13, www.tellmeastory.biz. Welcome you to the ninth and the last episode of Gender Stereotyping series. I am privileged today to have with us Neil De Silva, Indira Basu, and Sayak this evening, and we are going to discuss Men Don't Cry. Tell Me Your Story calls for submission on the writing from Gender Stereotyping. A platter of workshop and master classes are also available for aspiring authors. Let me begin with introducing the panelists each by each and this evening. First, we have Neil De Silva, with over dozen books to his credit, like Yakshini, Playthings, Maya's New Husband, and many more. Neil De Silva is a known name in the Indian literary world. He writes in the horror genre. His unique stories that have themes of Indian folklore and mythology have struck a chord with a wide range of readers, eliciting praise from various quarters. His publishers include Penguin Random House, Rupa Publication, Hachette, HarperCollins, and he has on screen adaptation deals on several of his books. He is also a screenwriter and TEDx speaker. Named as one of the top 7 Indian horror writers to be read by UK Daisy Bleach magazine, his books have been listed on Monster Complex and The Curious Reader, among other prestigious book lists. Sir, welcome to this evening.
Thank you very much, Joyashree. It's a pleasure to meet friends and to be able to talk on this very important subject that we are embarking on. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Indira Basu. Indira Basu is a former journalist and editor with bylines in national publications such as The Hindu, The Queen. She has covered topics cutting across gender, public policy, environment, and national politics. Indira now works in the ECG Environmental Social Governance sector at the global consulting firm, mainly on the issues across both the social sector and environmental policy climate change. She has served on the board of Indian Youth Climate Network and has addressed several global forums on the climate crisis, including COP27 and the World Sustainable Development Summit. Ma'am, welcome.
Thank you so much. Wonderful to be here. Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, but not the least, we have Shayad Pal. He works as an assistant professor in the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication School of Media and Communication at Adamas University, Calcutta. Earlier, he was associated with the NSH Knowledge Campus in Calcutta, Ramoji Kiran Universe in Hyderabad, Symbiosis School of Media and Communication in Bengaluru, and MIT University in Kolkata. He has had a brief industry stint spanning roughly 4 years. He is pursuing his PhD under the Faculty of Media and Communication at Symbiosis International in Pune. He is a research enthusiast and has published his research in Scopus Index and UGC peer listed journals, edited 3 books along with book chapters with international publishers, and several peer-reviewed journals. His area of interest in research lies in advertising, sustainable communication, consumer psychology, and media economics. Sir, welcome you to to this evening.
Yeah, thank you, Joyashree. Thank you very much for the brief introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So let's begin to our discussion. The very first question that I will ask you to each of you, that have you personally experienced or witnessed the impact of gender stereotypes like men don't cry and men will be men, or have these stereotypes influenced your understanding of masculinity and femininity both? So first, tell me your story, Nilsa.
I don't know where to begin. The thing is, we have lived our lives in, at least for me, I'm a Mumbai guy. So I have grown up in this family, which is very, I would say, even at that time when I was born in 1975. So I'm an 80s, 90s kid. You can put that was the my formative years, and I grew up in a house that was quite liberal. So my parents, they did not have any kind of like, okay, this is a boy, this is a girl. We were 2 brothers, but in my extended family, means I mean, I'm talking about my uncles, aunts, and all. So we have a lot of cousins, and there were girls, there are girls, there are boys, and I've never seen in my entire family there being any kind of a stereotyping like, okay, girls are supposed to do this and boys are supposed to do this. That never came from within my family. Having said that, growing up in a place like Mumbai, a very cosmopolitan city, and a city that brings in a lot of things on its plate, different cultural norms, different ways of thinking. from our neighborhood, from our locality. There were many comments at particular point of time. So, as a kid growing up, I was quite chubby and cute and all that. So, I was a big hit. I'm talking about my very very childhood days. So, I used to be a big hit among the uh, the girls, the elderly girls. They used to carry me and take me around all over the building, play with me, and all. So growing up, when I grew up, when I came to, you could say my adolescence or something like that, I was very connected with the girls in our building, and I'm talking about the girls who were a bit older than me, who were already in college and all. And sometimes we used to play together because I used to play games with them, like games like Lagori, Chupachi, Sapli, all those 90s and 80s games, which are quite nostalgic now. Nobody plays them anymore. So when I used to do that, my parents had no objection at all. I mean, that was fine. It's okay. Boys and girls play together. That's all good. But there were certain neighboring aunties. And these neighboring aunties, as neighboring aunties are habituated to, they had this habit of kala kandi. So they used to say, क्या लड़कियों के साथ खेलते रहता है? You are a boy, you have to behave like a boy. Now you are grown up, at that time I was like 11, 12 or something like that. So you are grown up, you are growing up, you have to understand the difference that you are a boy, they are girls. So, sometimes it used to rankle me. I never understood at that age, like, why is this difference? Because we have all grown up together. Even my school was a co-ed school. So we had like boys and girls, and we were always, I never saw a difference in that form, when I'm talking in terms of friendship, opening up to somebody. I never saw a difference at that time. But this was ingrained in me from the external factors around me. And the neighbors would tell me, then certain other people started telling me. My friends, now, friends, I'm talking about school friends, the boys especially. They used to tell, क्या लड़कियों के साथ खेलते रहता है, लड़कियों के जैसे ही बन जाएगा. You'll talk like them, you'll start behaving like that. So somehow, that's a very impressionable age. You're very fragile, you're very pliable at that age when you're just growing into this adult, you're understanding your own body. I understood that, okay, somewhere something is not correct and I have to move away. Then I stopped going down with all these games and all that we used to play as a group, and I started seeking out so-called boys groups, which used to play cricket, which used to play football, and that was how. See, this is a very minor thing. If you come to think of it, it's a very minor thing. It's a small thing. I'm sure Indira and Shaik will have deeper experiences to share probably. But the thing is, with me, this was something that shaped my adolescence and then my youth, because I understood that, okay, even though you don't have these differences in your mind, there are people who will put these differences in you. Now, in my family, when there are festivals, right, we go and wish everybody. We wish, and it's like we even wish with a handshake, or we are quite open like that, even among the boys and the girls and all. It's all normal. It's quite normal. But then when I celebrate, when I'm invited to certain other houses, I'm talking about times in my youth, like when I was maybe 19, 20 and all that. I had a business at that time. So I used to get invited to places. And then there were certain families where even when I went for Diwali and all, for example, to wish for Diwali, I did not know that when you're wishing a man, you can shake hands, but when you're wishing a woman, you have to just do a namaste. Now, there were certain families like that, and I did not know that difference. And I extended my hand to shake a hand with a woman, and everybody started looking. I never understood what that difference was. So this is something that has taken shape slowly but surely. You are told that, okay, a man is different, a woman is different, and a man's place in society is, all those cliches which I'll not use now. We'll come to it. And a woman's place is this. This is how. I'll come to my adulthood later.
Thank you, sir. And that's absolutely true. Like we don't like from childhood, we don't have any conception of any difference or gender biasness. That is society that trust upon us. So with that note, ma'am, do you have any experience, personal or anything?
So I had the exact opposite experience of Neil as far as school is concerned, for by virtue of the fact that I went to an all girls convent in Calcutta. And an all girls convent is very, very different from a co-ed school. And a lot of schools at the time that I was studying in Calcutta, some of the popular schools, among the popular schools, some of them were single gender schools. It was quite common to be in a single gender school back then, I think. uh, I mean, at least in my circles, I don't want to paint everybody with the same brush. There are also other schools which are very good but are co-ed, but I'll just talk about my experience. So I think growing up in that uh, context, uh, essentially a lot a lot of problematic views are kind of taught to you, because you're also sort of observing gender roles playing out in a very limited setting. And you're often told to be a good girl, you're taught to sit like a lady, you're taught to cross your legs, you're told that you can't clap too loudly at at inter-school competitions if you go somewhere else, especially in a boys school. So I remember those kinds of things, which today sound completely alien and old fashioned, but back in the day, that's how we were taught. However, I think a large bunch of us, myself included, also came from progressive families, for which I'm grateful, and that helped balance out things quite a bit. In that, uh, we all would laugh, I mean, not maybe in front of the teachers, but if any teacher said, "Oh, don't clap too loudly at a boys' school," and all, we would laugh amongst ourselves. We would ridicule it, we'd be like, why can't you clap? I mean, how is that, unladylike or whatever? And we of course envied other girls or boys in co-ed settings or in more liberal schools, because they had it easier than us, and we were quite resentful, honestly, which I think is telling of the fact that even at that very, very young and impressionable age, we already, some of us young girls, had a sense of the world, we had a sense of ourselves, and we had a sense of who we wanted to be. And I think that agency that we had within ourselves is so important, because I'd like to say that, and now I'm digressing a little bit, but just to say that a lot of times we don't give children autonomy and agency. We patronize children. We think that they're stupid or they don't have the common sense or intelligence of their own. But the truth is, all human beings, most, I'd like to say, not everyone, but they have their own intuitive intelligence, and so do children, if they're allowed to you know perform it and function in an autonomous fashion, and if they're given more agency, I think they can sort of really come into their own and think for themselves. So I'm lucky that we had those kinds of opportunities. Having said that, growing up in that slightly regressive schooling environment in some ways, not in every way, I think one also felt a bit conscious about their bodies. I realize now, looking back, that going to maybe a boys' school or interacting with the opposite sex in certain contexts, I felt that, oh, I should be more proper. I should, I mean, it would be very subconscious, and minor things like how I'm sitting, how I'm talking, how I'm engaging, not going too close, not shaking someone's hand too intimately, or not hugging somebody of the opposite sex that I didn't know. Uh, who I have grown up to be and who I'm now is an entirely different story, which I'll come to later. But this was childhood, and of course, even though our, the saying goes, and there are two other Bengalis with me here, Shayok and Joyashree. So a lot of people outside of Bengal, like to think that Bengal is so progressive. All Bengalis are very broad-minded, quote unquote broad-minded, liberal. That's the general thought. While some of it may be true, again, you can't paint a whole community with the same brush. But just to tell other viewers from other parts or even from Bengal who are watching that we also had our share of problems like anywhere else in the country and amongst any other communities. It's not all hunky dory and everything's not, pristine. So I think even in our liberal backgrounds, a lot of times there would be some aunt or some, a grand aunt or somebody, or even uncles would be like, oh, why is your daughter learning how to dance? Why can't she do something better like read or write or, learn poetry? Right? Because that seemed more respectable than something like dance. Why should your daughters go out and dance somewhere? And I also remember, like, a good friend of mine who wanted to learn Western dance, some other forms like Latin dance, etc. How much she had to battle at home. She's not from my community, different background once again, but same circles. So she had to really really fight it out with her family to uh, do the dance lessons she wanted to, and it was quite bitter, initially, and she had to fight her way through it. So I think their gender plays a huge role in the things you get to do, the way you present your bodies, yourself in public, and how you're expected to conduct yourself. Uh, Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. And I can relate to you most because I all my life was all girls school, all girls college. So making guys friends from like for the first time and all the agency is slightly different from the others. So the experience also a little different from seeing them. Sir, what are your experience, Shahid, sir?
Yeah. Before I come into my own experience, I would like to say that many people where they get stuck and they get confused, gender and masculinity or femininity are different, right? Gender, when we call gender like male, female, third gender, and there are a lot of now categorizations. We see LGBTQ plus community. Now, whenever we talk about masculinity, it's the traits basically that we talk about. A man can have feminine characteristics or traits, or woman can also have, masculine characteristics. Now, whenever we talk about these traits, like masculine traits, they are dominant, strong, independent, brave, innovative. These are we actually, from the psychological and human behavioral perspectives, we can call these actually masculine. And whenever we talk about the feminine perspectives or the traits, they are like emotional, nurturing, vulnerable, caring, and humble. So these are, I'm not saying that a woman has to have all these things. So this is where we get confused with the gender. Now, as I said, male is a gender, sex, and female is a sex, another gender. Now this is where we actually get confused. Now coming back to my own story, as I can definitely relate with Indira and probably with you that in Kolkata there are a lot of schools. I mean, the way back we had our schoolings, I also studied in a all boys schools. Now when I went to 11, 12, I mean higher secondary, and my plus 10, plus 12, then even in college, we got to actually got to sit with the girls. So even I remember in my higher secondary school we had a co-education, and the girl used to sit in a different section in the same classroom, and the boy used to sit in a different section. So now when I look back all those days, I feel funny that why would you make girls and boys sit in the same room but in a different row on different section. They are not allowed to share the same bench or the same section. So this was very, peculiar back then. Now, when I'm thinking about all those days, now I feel this is very peculiar. But the our upbringing, probably I will come to those areas that actually also compels us that exactly the men don't cry. So I remember 2020, I lost my father. I was sitting in the burning heart, and my father's pyre was being ready, and my mother and brother was also there, younger brother. So I remember I had a very close friend, and I almost control my tears that if I break down, what will happen to them? As an elder son, I cannot cry. I cannot, you know, fall apart. I cannot, cry in front, at least not in front of them. So I asked my friend that, can I use your shoulder? So I rest my head on his shoulder, and I silently sobbed for a few seconds. I was careful that my mother and brother would not watch me. So this was probably, because of my upbringing, because I thought I have a lady, I have my mother to take care of, I have my younger brother to take care of. So if the now I was the eldest man in the family, and I had to take care of the family, and at least for psychological concerns and emotional concerns. So that was I felt that time I felt key, why it should be. I mean, if I had a elder sister or younger sister, My mother was crying bitterly. Mother was crying with all her heart out. But strangely, also, I also didn't see my brother, cry so much. So it was probably in our upbringing, as you said, that though I actually, keep on telling my students there should not be any demarcations based on the gender, there should not be any proliferation, there should not be any, distinction between genders, there should not be distinction. Between the pay. You should not discriminate anybody based on their gender, skin color, or their sexual preferences, or anything, meditorial, capabilities. But somehow, probably, some at some point of time, we cannot get out of this stereotypical thoughts that I'm a man. I have to stay strong. I have to take care of my family. There are women in my family. I have to take care of them. So that's a short, experience I had. I have many such experience, but as I said, my family was very, liberal. Interestingly, my mother and father both wanted a girl child, but both of were male. So I remember my brother was, but still, I mean, my brother is still 7 years younger to me. And I later on I heard it from my mother that my father was, looking out for schools, good schools, I mean, like convent schools and good schools for women in Kolkata, that he expected the next child would be a girl child. So he desperately wanted a girl child in the family. But unfortunately, when my brother was born, he said, ki, again, a monkey came to the family. So again, I have to look for a school where the boy would be studying. So it's a mixed experience from the family, but at the same time, in the society, I remember one another incident. I was kind of tall among my friend, and in my growing years, I was getting exceptionally tall, compared to my, fellow friends. So one day, one of my uncle, so we have a very para culture, especially in North Kolkata, where we have the societies and people come and sit on the rocks and they talk for hours. So one day when I was going to the field with my friends to for a football match, and one of the uncle in my para, he pointed out and told me that you are growing so tall. It'll be very hard to find out a bride for you. So I did not respond to him. So when I go back and think about those days, then I feel like what kind of mentality they have. Like a purpose of a boy to get married to a girl and a girl to get married to a established boy. Is it the purpose? And they look at the I mean life perspective and career perspective of man or woman in that way. Career, studies, hobbies, achievements, it doesn't make any difference for them. It's all comes to that one point. You have to get married and, grow a family. Yeah, over to you, Joyashree.
Thank you, sir, for sharing such experiences. And obviously, and vice versa, as you told that a tall girl also have to listen to such things. That how can any groom will marry you or any boy? So the stereotypes doesn't limit to any specific gender, I guess, but everyone go through. Doesn't matter how she or he looks, he or he have to face any kind such in her lifetime. My next question, that is mainly a very burning topic in today's. So, Neil sir, my question to you, that there is a popular statement or concept, you can say, that men are emotionally unavailable, quote unquote. Many failed relationships were caused by men's lack of emotional involvement. Even if one is not in a relationship, we can see male figures in our family or male friends rarely communicating his feelings openly. They are too afraid to expose their vulnerabilities or vulnerable side. Do you think this fear or the tendency to stick to the social perception or interfere with the unpretentious blossoming of male personalities?
And this question adheres very, very directly to the topic, that is men don't cry. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to answer this with how things happened in my own life, like with a couple of anecdotes. The thing is, it is true. I mean, being a man, I know very well how that statement is slowly ingrained in you, embossed upon you right from your childhood that men must not show their feelings. Even if you are unstable about something, if you are feeling vulnerable about something, keep it to yourself, because you have, once you are grown, you have to look after your parents, then you have to look after your own family, that is your wife, your kids. And if you break down, like how Shayak told about his incident, totally connect with that. And Shayak, by the way, we have a lot of similarities. I have a younger brother who is 7 years younger to me. My father expired a few years back, and your story quite resonated. So it was there in my growing up times. It was told to me also in a lot of ways. My parents never told it to me. As I said, they were quite open minded, but it came from a lot of sources. It came from the aunties especially, because women are the ones I have seen who are very instrumental in putting these ideas into your head that men have to behave like this. And men won't usually talk about all these things, but it's the aunties, the neighboring aunties, and the other aunties all around who will put this stuff into your head. And also, I'm talking about the friends that you make in your school and your college. They are the ones who would start putting these ideas in your head. And how can we ignore the influence of our society, our culture, our cinema? Because all these things are where it comes from. That okay, man has to be the one who is the provider, who is the one who has to be the emotional rock in the house. And if he is not the emotional rock, if he crumbles, if he shows his vulnerabilities, then everything will come crashing down. So that was what was in my head also. So I was 30 when I got married, and that is when things started to really change for me. So I was always a little bit sensitive in terms like emotionally, I would get very easily affected by things, and I would display my emotions. I would even, there are times when I've wept, I've cried, and quite openly. So I don't shy away from that. Now, okay, so I got married at 30, and my wife and I, we made a family. So we had two kids and all that. I had started settling down in life. So that was around as soon as I finished my MSc post graduation, that is uh, 21, 23. That was the time when I started my business. It was a coaching class, and I was a teacher. I used to teach, and my life was very busy. I missed most of my childhood, most of my youth, because I was quite busy all the time. Now, the thing is, there were three aspects. So the third aspect here is I also had bought a house, my own house, and that house, I mean, I'm talking about a three-bedroom house apartment in Mumbai, so a huge thing. And of course, I could not afford it all the way, so I had to go for a housing loan. And these were all the circumstances that I entered 2006 with. 2005, I got married, and 2006, all these things were in place. And I had a freelance project that I was also doing at that time. Now, around a couple of years later, that is 2008 or something like that, by that time my house was paid for a few years, and everything was going quite hunky dory. With my business, with my freelance project, I was able to afford the EMIs quite well. But in 2008, was it? I don't remember exactly. I lost the freelance project, and that happened. I got the email. It was a project from the US. I got the email, and the email was that we are planning to discontinue this project and all those things. And I was shaken. Like I was completely shaken, because I was depending on that one project to pay all my EMIs over here. And it had been going on smoothly for a few months, and I did not know what to do. Like it had been told to me that you are the provider and you have to do this, and everything depends on you. Suddenly, I got that kind of a burst, and my there were all these flashes in my mind, like, okay, we will lose the house, we'll be thrown out. I have two kids now. What will happen to them? I And everything is quite new. Everything is still on shaky ground. We are not settled. And for days, like couple of days, I was in that kind of a state. I was not able to think of anything else, and I did not know whom to share it with. So by that time, we had gone nuclear. So it was like me, my wife, and my two kids. We were the only people in the house. My wife noticed it. She noticed it, and she asked me one day, like, after the kids were asleep. It was actually night time. So she asked me like, "What's bugging you? What's the problem?" I said, "There's nothing. It's okay. It's all fine." See that ingrained mindset that we have, that you don't talk about all these things. She said, "No, something is definitely wrong, and you have to tell me what it is." Like she put this kind of exertion on me that you have to tell. So finally, I started talking, and I said that I started with, that project, we lost it. So that was my starting sentence. That one sentence, to say that sentence, it took me days. Like, how would I tell it? Yeah, I was completely like blacked out by that time. But the moment I said that sentence, I shared that, whatever that setback that we had with her, and she just said, okay, and she just heard. It was not like she didn't go into a kind of that dramatic phase where, oh, abhi hum kya karenge, abhi where we'll go and all that. Nothing like that. She just said okay, and she heard, and because she was so complacent about it, I would say, not complacent, but she took it so well that I broke down. And seriously, I started talking to her, like, how things were, like how since the age of 17, I started working, and I was just working, my coaching classes, my this, my that. And now I had to take freelance projects also, because now I have a family, and I have been told that, okay, if the man does not earn, then nobody can do anything for the family. The family goes into doldrums, and all those things I shared with her. And as I'm talking, I'm also crying. Okay, so the sobbing is also going on, and it's the first time. And we have been married only for like by that time, and she is also like, we were not yet completely settled with each other as people. It was an arranged marriage, but the thing is, that was the first kind of outburst, and because of that, we grew closer. And suddenly, on sharing that thing, that sharing that vulnerability or whatever it was, I felt so much lighter. Suddenly I felt that, so what if a project goes? I still have my family. They are still there, and we'll work it together. So this happened once again when I was 39. Actually, I turned author when I was 39. And before that, I had all these things that I had taken up as my in my youth, and I continued with them, the teaching part and the other things. Now, the thing is, when I entered the age of 39, you could call it a midlife crisis or whatever. I don't call it as a midlife crisis. I call it as my calling. We were honeymooning, second honeymoon of sorts in Goa, and we were there with the family. I mean, the kids. And there was this thing that had been going on in my head for a long time, that I'm a creative guy. And what am I doing teaching in a coaching class? I'm going in the classroom, I'm teaching the same topics year after year, and the kids are learning it. The students, they are getting good marks. They are going all over the world. They are having their careers. And what am I doing? I'm just in this one room teaching the same thing year after year. And that started bugging me so bad in my late 30s that I could not take it anymore. I wanted to do something. I wanted to write a book. That was where the idea had come to me. I wanted to write a book, and I wanted it so bad that again I felt that, the kind of, I would not use the word depression because it has a totally different meaning clinically, but it was close to that. Everything had blacked out for me, and I had lost my interest in teaching. I did not want to talk to people. I would be silent for days and days and days. And Anita found out, something is happening again. The second time in our lives. And we were in Goa, as I said, we were having this nice trip. We were sitting on in this cottage kind of place. It was the Kalamgut beach, and we were seeing the beach front. Aram se we were sitting, wine in hand. And she tells me something is wrong. Now you have to tell me again. What is it? And I told her, and this was a big decision at that time. I told her that I want to write a book, and I want to write it, but I want to give it my all. I don't want to do anything else. That means I want to stop teaching. And the teaching thing stopping means it was a huge thing for us. It was a coaching class which had 500 students. So that was a big, big, big step. But once again, she held my hand. And because I shared, you know, we found out a way. And the way was, I wrote my book. We had some sources built up till that time. So I wrote my book. I gave it a shot, like, will it work? Won't it work? And she said that I will take up teaching. She's a teacher now. Now, 6 years, 7 years down the line, things have really worked out for us because we spoke, we communicated, we shared our things with each other. I'm an author. I've written 16 books now, and I'm here talking to you because of that background or whatever. My wife is doing very well as a teacher herself. She just became the HOD this year, and that's the whole thing. Now, if I had kept it within me, I would have suffocated both times. Both these incidents that I shared, I would have suffocated. I would not have been able to find a way out of it, and I don't know what would have happened, but I could not see a light. So the thing is, what I'm telling people who are listening to us, like it's not worth keeping all these things stifled within you. You sometimes need that vent, and sometimes that ear is just very close. If you just share, and if you don't think of yourself as okay, I'm this alpha male who should not talk about, the whole idea of alpha male is quite toxic in a way. So if you just share, maybe things work out.
That is a great way, but that means also that most of the men are doing this or suppressing their feelings because of the responsibility. Responsibility is a great factor, sir.
You should see men when they drink together, when they go to when they
Okay.
have, that is the time the vulnerabilities really start loosening up. When the women are not around and only you have got something like a black label in front of you, and that is the time every man will break down and will talk about what is bugging him at home. So that is the time you should actually capture this.
And
Okay,
about their
sir.
secrets also.
Okay. Ma'am, I'm coming to you. And my question is
Sure.
like what Sayak sir has already like raised the topic. So similar to that, there is an interview of Prince Harry where he mentioned that he has only cried since his mother passed away at her funeral, and then maybe once since then. The Duke of Sussex has revealed that he felt the guilt over not being able to cry in front of weeping mourners at Kingston Palace, after his mother's death in front of public. Regardless of the country, caste, or even religion, why is there a huge difference between the way men and women process their emotion in public or in private? Is it in their nature or in their upbringing or nurture?
Thanks for that question, Joyashree. I hope I'm audible. I couldn't hear some. Okay, no, there's no more. There was some disturbance. Thank you. It's a good question. I think, first of all, let me just separate two different things. One is that the royal family is the royal family. So, over there, whether you're, man, woman, child, whatever, I think there are certain expectations on decorum, especially in the public fora, on how you're supposed to behave, what you're supposed to do. And the whole British stiff upper lip is, quite, it's not just a stereotype, it's a thing, so I think, with regard to Prince Harry's incident, I think I mean, it was less about. I mean, of course, the element of gender also comes into play, sure, but I think here it was more a case of his class and social position, that context, rather than him being a man in that case. But also coming to the point which you raised about how men and women process their emotions differently, whether it's biological, whether or it's social. I think it's primarily social, in that I from when we are children, first of all, women and men are raised differently. Again, painting it with a broad brush, just because it is largely true, in amongst all our experiences, I'm sure. uh, Women, I think, from a younger age, they are taught to have a sense of greater responsibility in terms of family. I don't mean in terms of being a breadwinner. So they are taught to take on more emotional load at home, be more caring. The role of being a nurturer, a caregiver, that sort of role, I think, is instilled more deeply in women. And I can definitely say that as a woman. And men, on the other hand, the burden of them becoming successful, and the markers of success are, unfortunately, very superficial. It is financial primarily, and the many, many ranks you climb in your career. So that onus lies on men. So because we are kind of compartmentalized into these two boxes, pigeonholed as such, and taught that okay, one, like the woman takes on the role of emotional labor, and the man takes on the role of actual you know physical, mental, whatever labor, in terms of work. So that automatically creates a difference and a barrier. So what happens is women are then told that okay, you have to always be uh, you know sort of open and empathetic towards the emotions of others around you. You have to weigh in on those more carefully. And in doing so, of course, you also have to be an open person. You have to be more vulnerable. Otherwise, how can you possibly reach out to somebody else in a effective fashion? And men are, I wouldn't say they are told, but it's more like taught behavior, because children, when they're growing up, they also see the behavior of those around them, the adults, and they absorb and imbibe some of those behaviors. So it's learned behavior as well. So you see that your mother is openly crying if there's some problem or there's some tragedy or whatever, but your father is kind of being more, stoic. He's keeping a steely, he's keeping a steely glare. He's just looking into the distance, or he's shutting himself up in a room, or going off for a walk, and that sort of thing. So when you see that as a child, you also realize that, oh, okay, we are, girls can cry, but boys can't. So much so that I think, and I don't just say this from my personal experience, but having observed it in media, having observed it amongst other friends, family members, etc. And I think when you grow older, there reaches a point where you as a woman also, when you see a man crying, let's say it's your friend, it's a family member or a colleague or whoever, you also struggle to kind of console them, because there are men who feel, who, I mean, also reach a breaking point. After all, we are all human, whether you're man, woman, or some, whatever you identify as. There are emotions in you, whether you've suppressed them or you've allowed them to surface. At some point, the dam walls are going to burst and emotions are going to come out. But when that does happen with a man, whether or not he has been vulnerable in the past, or he's just suddenly, kind of had an outburst, that's a different story. But in that moment, I have felt personally, and I've also noticed other women, they struggle to console a man versus consoling a woman, a crying woman. So I think that itself also tells us that as women also, we have also internalized so much of patriarchal expectations, norms, and observed and learned behavior since our childhoods, that even though some of us have liberal mindsets, we are feminists, etc., we also wonder at that moment, oh my God, how am I going to console this guy? Oh my God, he's crying. Oh my God, this is a tragedy. As opposed to a woman crying, we're like, acha, theek hai, it's fine, she'll be okay, in a few minutes, I can go hug her or hold her hand or whatever. So I think that is very telling of where the state of affairs, how it's been, and how, you know, historically how it's been and what we've been taught. And I just like to say that this is not just toxic for, the fact that the burden of emotions has, historically been on women and not so much on men, is not just harmful for women, it's extremely harmful for men to be suppressing their emotions, to, because it leads to, as Neil was touching upon that fact, that I mean, he said it with a more direct example, that when he opened up to his partner, the problem got resolved, and had he not opened up, maybe had he suppressed everything, buried it under the carpet and moved on, maybe things would have been very different for him. So I think when you suppress your emotions as a man, or even as a woman for that matter, or you don't know how to express your emotions, you don't know how to be vulnerable, uh, then I think a lot of problems can creep up later. You can have mental health issues. You can cause, upsets by not addressing problems, by shoving them under the rug, and then years later they creep up in different ways. They can cause rifts in relationships also, I mean, romantic or otherwise, because just because you're not addressing something and you pretend that it's not there doesn't mean it's not there, right? It's the elephant in the room you're not addressing. It's like being an ostrich burying their proverbial head in the sand and pretending that all is well. So I think expression of emotions is very important for all people in general, whether you're a, whether you identify as male, female, or something else. And children, I feel from a young age, should be taught that it is very healthy. It's, in fact, it's in the interest of their own health, no matter what they identify as, to be able to express themselves openly, to have a voice, to be able to tell people when they're not comfortable, and to be respectful in that, in that communication, and to also be respectful when somebody else is showing vulnerability, and not to mock them. Because a lot of boys, when they're children, they're, mocked in school, or they're bullied if they're crying or whatever. They're told, oh, man up, oh, it's fine, you're a man, or you're going to be a man, or whatever. So those are very problematic statements. Unfortunately, those still exist today, even though we don't see them as often, perhaps because of so much, progressive discourse that's available to us through various forms of media like this platform. But it very much exists, and I also feel like class does have a role to play in it very heavily, because in certain classes like ours, where we are more privileged, we have more, we're able to have these conversations today. I think probably this issue is being addressed at some levels, but in different social and socioeconomic contexts, I still feel that you know there could be challenges that men and women both face. So I'll leave us with that thought on this note.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And I think not expressing their inner emotion that also leads them to depression. That is also one of the main reason of depression, not only in men but in women also. And on that topic, I want to ask Shayak sir about that more. That phrases such as "मर्द को दर्द नहीं होता" are thrown at men from a very young age. They are encouraged down this route by a culture and environment which cheers a laddish and overtly masculine mindset. Boys grow into men who are often seen to be less open about their feelings in comparison to women. With increased rates of depression, suicide is leading cause of death among young males and students. How do you think these stereotypes affect the ability to navigate their personal reality, vice versa their social reality? Over to you, sir.
Yeah, yeah. I guess there are some statistics, there are some reports which actually says that men are suffering from heart diseases more than women in some cases. But there are alternative studies which also suggest. I actually found, another paper in Nature journal that says women are actually facing a lot of depression. So that was a 2018 paper. But anyways, so depression has their individual reasons. And for men, what I think that because there's a less outlets, less windows to express our feelings. Because I've seen even my workplace that something bad happened or something depressing happened. For example, there are colleagues from other states who are feeling homesick. They can easily cry. For example, not in front of students, obviously, in front of us, the friends, and colleagues. But what if, as I said, my father passed away in 2020. I even after 2 days, I started taking classes. That time the COVID was going, and I was not allowed to show off my emotions. I was not allowed to break down. But it was a different case for others. I remember one of the colleagues, or lady colleagues. Again, I'm not discriminating, but she was feeling bad. She was feeling homesick, and she started crying. And so interestingly, another woman colleague, she came and says, "Don't cry, don't show your vulnerability. You hold on to yourself. It's okay. It's fine to be sad, but it's not okay to be cry." There are others. Have you seen any of the male colleagues or any of us? A lot of us actually having a lot of issues. That doesn't mean that we can show off our emotions in the workplace. You go back home, shut yourself, and cry or to your friends and family, that's fine. But workplace is something else. So that probably, some professional ethics that you need to show, that we cannot mix up our professional space and personal space. But for men, I guess we do not have that avenue. I mean, the door was always shut for us. We cannot show our emotions. As I, as I was talking about this report, let us go back to it. Then, there are other reports that shows in different age groups, men are much more feeling, psychological disorders and stresses and depressions more than women. And interestingly, when the ages, they age. I mean, this was a comparative study between men and women. When the age, for example, at the age of 60 and above, men and women, they are all they are having the same level of depressions and anxiety. So probably at that point of time, when you age, like when you age and when you become turn 60 or 65, probably our that outer shell of pretension falls down. And I have seen my father, when he was aged, and he sat, sometimes he sat down. I never saw my father to break down, but when he was 67, I guess 67, 68, he sat down and he cried for some time, not in front of my mother but in front of me, and said, this thing I have done right, this and I could have improved. So I guess with age, this change that we come out of our shell. But at the same time, whenever we talk about the depressions and suicide, there's another factor. Is the suicide related to depression? Again, there are studies, because that's kind of my nature, that referring the studies, always we always refer to the studies which are actually proven and the facts are taken down. So there are studies which shows that the suicidal rate, there are studies where the suicidal rates between genders have been taken down from 1971 to 2021, 2022, and it shows that a huge increase in the male suicide rates. For example, when it came down to 2022, it reaches around, if I'm not wrong, almost 120,000 a year for men, whereas for female it was only around 40 or 45,000 suicidal case. Now, again, uh, how these reports are coming in, because people are reporting that they are suffering from depression. There are also studies that says that every three out of one, I mean, one out of three people are a patient of depression or anxiety. There are different outcomes. We do not address to these issues. And rightly, Indira said that, now we are having such discussions. 10 years, 15 years back, we did not have such privileges. People were afraid of talking about it. People were afraid of talking about mental health. People were afraid of talking about mental health to even to their colleagues and friends, because they would have considered, "Are tu pagal hai." If you're going to meet a psychologist, you will be pretended, you will feel that people will feel that, "Arey, iske dimag mein which problem hai?" The person must be a mad person. So it's very essential. There are many campaigns are happening. I could see that during COVID, there are a lot of campaigns, art campaigns from the government side also. They have raised and they have really worked upon these issues, that, work upon your mental health. That is very, very essential. At certain point of time, as also been said, we have breakdowns, we fall down, then also we can have depressions, and people feel that, others lives are very green, other lives are very happy, they are happy, they're rich because they have money and they have beautiful family, they are rich. I distinctly remember one of my colleague was giving me one example. He started working with a company, Holdia Petrochemical, and he had a boss. He was probably IIT graduate at that point of time, probably 25, 30 years back. And he was from a very well-to-do family. He had a beautiful wife. They are very well educated. And at that point of time, like 30 years back, he used to rob a Mercedes level car. He had everything he could wish for. So one fine day, I mean, they were having a chat, and he found his boss. That person was little sad, and when he asked him, he said, uh, I mean, he was very surprised at why you are sad. And because the person had everything, they have children, beautiful wife, he was getting very good salary, drawing very good salary from his job. But he said, why I'm depressed? But because I feel at some point of time, at some day, I have to leave all this and die. So that says that where the depression lies and how people can get depressed, and probably over the issues which doesn't even arise. That person was probably in mid 40s or close to 50. He still had 10 years ahead, 10, 12 years ahead to retirement. He had everything. He had a foreign degree and everything. But still, he was depressed because he had to leave all these privileges. He had to leave this beautiful world, and he was getting depressed. So these things actually needs to be addressed, and there are a lot of issues. There are a lot of suicidal case, as I said, related to depression, anxiety, and sometimes these anxieties and depressions formed into long-term, symptoms like personality disorders, bipolarities. I'm not specialist in those area exactly, clinical psychology, but there are, some diseases that actually causes by these depressions. And if you let this depression go on without treating them properly, without proper guidance, they can get into a chronic depression, and that can create a lot of problem even in a good married life. People start finding out faults, people will start finding out reasons to fight for, where the reason actually is negligible, I mean does not really exist. So I think, from the very very beginning, we should always address this issue that whatever you want to do, however you want to live your life, you leave it, provided you do not do anything wrong with the people and wrong to yourself. And most importantly, most importantly, loving yourself. Loving own self is very, very important. First, you love yourself, then only you can love somebody else. First, you respect yourself, then only you can actually respect somebody. Yeah. Over to you, Joyashree.
Thank you so much, sir. And the suggestion you have said, that is very like inspiring. And I want to ask you, all of you, many more questions, but because of the time crunch, I have to conclude it. And my concluding question to all of you, and also I will include another topic into it because one audience asked that. So all of you are creative personalities. It would be unfair to end this panel discussion without me inviting you to recommend books or films which subtly or hard-hittingly traps male stereotypes that like toxic masculinity, that is a very popular genre right now. So there are many works on women stereotypes. Which book or films inspired your idea of the beauty of a man? First, Neil, sir, you, starting with you. Sir, you are muted. Sir, hello. Hmm.
No, I was too busy listening and I forgot to unmute myself. So yes, you are asking me for recommendations of books and films. So I just said that
Yes.
definitely not movies like Animal and Kabir Singh. They are the complete extreme of what should not be done. Okay, but the thing is that movies at one time they have undergone a lot of difference from what we used to watch in the 80s and 90s. And the original person who made this dialogue famous, "Mard ko kabhi dard nahi hota," that is Amitabh Bachchan. And his movies were mostly of that angry young man stereotype, which put in this idea that okay, the man is supposed to be the angry person who takes revenge and all. It has been coming down, but if you see, even our Indian cinema has changed a lot in these decades. They are trying to change a lot, and now we have, especially with the influx of the OTT platforms, Netflix and Amazon Prime, which actually have a structure for their programs where they have to have inclusivity as a factor in all the shows that they produce and all. So I don't know offhand like that to recommend a kind of a book or film or something like that where masculinity is really at its, as you say, the best example of it. But you see these stray incidents in across cinema. Like I find something like Fault in Our Stars also to be a very nice film that deals with these subjects. It's about a very dark subject, of course. It's about terminal illness and falling in love in that space. But at the same time, it is about both these characters sharing what they feel about each other, and there are no barriers because they know that we are going to die. So, because of that barrier not being there, because they are so different from society, that they have found solace in each other, you can see them sans veneer, you can see them without any barricades, without any emotional blocks, and that is where they are completely. That's why it's such a beautiful love story. Why just stick to such things? I see this across now. Now, even I was just watching Stranger Things, and that's a completely different thing. It's a sci-fi horror mystery, but even in that, if you see how sensitively they have dealt with the sexual feelings of the growing up kids, plus there is nothing in Even a show like Stranger Things, it's we have come a long way from the previous shows where the male characters had to do certain things and the female characters had to do certain other things. It's not like that. In Stranger Things, there is a mix of all kinds of gender orientations, sexual orientations, and all these people are working towards one mission with their strengths and weaknesses, which are not dependent on. I know I'm giving very bad examples, but that's what I want to say. Like we are changing as a society, and we are coming out from that "mart ko dar nahi hota" scenario, which is a very positive sign.
Okay, sir. So we need more books on like which portrays man at its best.
We do,
Okay,
we do need that, and I'm sure Indira and Sayak will give some examples on those.
sure, sir. Ma'am, what are your recommendations?
Um, so I honestly I can't think of specific moments. It's not coming to me right now where men specifically are depicted as being vulnerable as such. But if you I think for the viewers here, if you want to read feminist literature where of course gender issues are talked about, which directly or indirectly, actually quite directly addresses the problems of hyper masculinity or toxic masculinity, but in some cases they don't exactly portray men being vulnerable or whatever, but by even showing the lack thereof of vulnerability or other deficits in a cisgendered heterosexual man or otherwise, I think one conveys the message very clearly. So there are books by Toni Morrison, there are books by Bell Hooks, of course Virginia Woolf, A Room of One's Own. uh, then there's a more recent book on which uh, you know uh, a film was based, which is a fantastic film as well. It's called Call Me by Your Name by Andre Asimin, which deals with same-sex love and portrays, I think, uh, men and their emotions very very beautifully. Uh, some movies, I think, from recent memory, especially from India. The most recent, I think, I was very late to the party to watch the blockbuster Rocky or Rani. I don't know why I didn't manage to catch it in the theater, even though it was there for some 4 5 months. I think it had a long run. I finally watched it on OTT a couple of days ago, as it happens, and I was so pleasantly surprised that while it was so much of a typical, big, Bollywood, film with, masala, color, gossip, fashion, designer clothes, everything. It had all the works and magic of a Karan Johar experience. Yet, how beautifully they addressed, gender stereotypes, where they showed, I don't know if all of you have watched Rocky or Rani here, uh, but if you haven't, then you must, because I think as a example of mainstream cinema that really helps break stereotypes and quite directly, without being very subtle, because subtleties are often lost on the Indian audience. We're not a very subtle people. We like it in our faces. So I think in that sense, the movie's messaging being hard hitting really works, because Alia Bhatt as Rani, she portrays very very formidable journalist who's feminist in her views, who is not afraid to speak her mind. She's quite unabashed, and she comes from a progressive family where her father is a soft spoken, gentle soul who's also a Kathak dancer. And then they show how. I mean, in fact, the father also in his depiction of the character beautifully at some point talks about how he was abused and insulted for his desires of becoming a Kathak dancer. He was mocked, he was ridiculed, even by his own father. And yet he didn't give up on his dream because he had a supportive mother. And even now, when people mock him and laugh at him, he feels the pain, but he persists in his conviction that he must pursue his art. And I think what that revealed to me was also that the uh, classically cisgendered heterosexual men, they struggle a lot with these kinds of situations where the expectation today is that, oh, if you're like this, then oh, you must be, you must fall on the LGBTQ spectrum. Not that anything's wrong with it, but then that becomes a way to pigeonhole people, because our expectations of gender performance, and gender is in a sense performance, as many theorists like Judith Butler have also said. So you're expected to behave and perform in a certain way as per what you're not just assigned at birth, but what you identify as. So if you say that, oh, I'm a heterosexual man, then you're expected to behave like the classic stereotype of one. And if you say you're gay, then okay, then it's accepted if you say, oh, I want to become a dancer, etc. So that should not be the case. But I think this film very well addresses that, apart from other issues. Some other films, I think, where male emotions or just different kinds of gender stereotypes, etc., are addressed in a more subtle fashion, and it's not a mainstream film. It's called Death in the Gunj, by directed, I think, by Konkona Sen Sharma. It released a few years ago, and there's one of the central characters played by Vikram Masay, I think,
Vikrant Massey.
called
Vikrant
Shutu.
Massey.
I think, sorry.
Vikrant Massey. I was just telling you.
Vikrant, sorry, Vikrant. Yeah, thank you. It has been a while. Thank you, Neil. So Vikrant Massey, I think, portrays the character of Shutu very, very, beautifully. So that's a must-watch. Death in the Gunj, and what else? Then there's also Oscar-winning film from some time back called Moonlight, which is a Hollywood film, and also from years ago. I think this is what, a 30-year-old or 25-year-old film. Can't remember at this point, but there's an Asian film by the seminal filmmaker Wong Kar-wai called Chungking Express. That also, I think, depicts male vulnerability and softness, very beautifully. A lot of Wong Kar-wai's films are able to depict just frailties in human beings, but also in men, with a lot of grace and subtlety, and in a very realistic fashion. So I think these are some good movies to watch out for.
Surely, ma'am. Thank you so much. Shayad sir, which books or things inspired your idea of beauty of a man?
Um, I was about to take the name of Call Me by My Name. That was one of the books I mean, film that actually shows the emotions, and though it actually portrays the intimate relationship between a boy rather and a man, but it shows the emotional spheres, different emotional spheres a man or and a boy that fits into, and it shows the joy, it shows separation, it shows the the calling and everything, and beautiful relationship. So there's another movie I would like to suggest, American Psycho, 2000. It came out in 2000, which actually is a story about a psychopath, and it shows how a man actually take care of himself, and he also ended up killing a lot of women in his in one of his apartment, and that creates a lot of problems in his workplace. At the very end, though I'm actually revealing the suspense, it shows it's there in his mind, and that's how he sees woman, that how he sees himself. So it's a completely different movie that came out in 2000, American Psycho. So one can actually definitely watch it. And now books, I read it 7 years back. Ayn Rand, Fountainhead. Some might be able to relate to it. It came out in 1941 at first. Now, Ayn Rand had it's a very difficult, and not, I would say difficult, a different way of writing. So it actually talks about this particular Fountainhead actually talks about a character, Howard Rock, who is an architect, and his life. He's treating himself the way he treats himself, the way he treats in and see society, as well as the way he treats other women. I mean, one particular woman, if we talk about. So this would show a different flare of emotion that clouds around a man through this book. So one caution, whoever is going to read Ayn Rand, you might find is this book, and from the very beginning it's very boring, it's very different, it's very difficult, but as you keep on to yourself, as you keep on reading to yourself, you will slowly and gradually grasp on it, and then you cannot get out of it. So that's one suggestion for books, which can be read.
I will second your opinion on the Fountainhead. In fact, that book, it was also on my mind. But okay, there's also the Catcher in the Rye, where it's a coming
Yes,
of age story of a boy in America and how he also starts coming to terms with everything that's happening around him. Also about the women in his life and how he grows and how he understands. It's a very controversial
yeah,
book, as was the Fountainhead for some
yes.
reasons. And both these books came out, I
And we
think,
can
at the
actually
same.
see, yeah, we can also see the interview of Ayn Rand, though it was a very old one. It's there available in YouTube, so you can see how Ayn Rand is talking about Fountainhead. And there's another book also she wrote, which is on a different context. But the fountain, especially when she talks about the fountainhead and the way she speaks about and narrates the character, the prime character, it's completely different.
Thank you so much for
Okay,
all the lovely suggestions. I will surely add those films and books in my watch list and reading list. Thank you, Neil sir, and Indira ma'am, and Shahid sir for the very insightful conversation and for your time this evening. Tell Me Your Story calls for submission on the writing prompt Gender Stereotyping. A platter of workshop and master classes are also available for aspiring authors. We hope to hear from you soon. Till then, stay well, stay happy, stay together, and good time. Bye, sir.
thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you,